2.
Hello and welcome to Bird Barrier Live Training. My name is Michael Gallion, and today we are going to be talking about pigeons. All last year when we did all of these webcasts for bird control training, there are surveys at the end along with the exams, and we ask for your feedback as to what you want to learn besides what we're already providing. And one of the categories that came up quite a bit was more specific information about the birds themselves. So today is the first of 6 of those that we put together. This is going to be about 30 minutes. There's only so much we can cover. We could go on for 4 hours just on pigeons alone. We don't want to bore you to death, but most importantly, we want to stay focused on the kinds of things that are going to be pertinent to you as a bird control specialist, and what kind of information on pigeons will be helpful for you in terms of their biology and basic characteristics about the bird. We'll probably stop a little bit before the 30-minute mark, and we'll take questions. What we're hoping for is for some people that are on the webcast today that are getting ready to do maybe their first pigeon job, or they have a job coming up that has pigeon problem and they want to go over some information about how to solve it. That's what the goal of learning about these birds is all about, your ability to solve them. So we'll cover some things. There's some basic information that you're going to learn about pigeons that will be helpful. We'll take questions at the end. If you signed up just for the pigeons and you happen to be on here, and after about 30 minutes, we will start the next session on gulls today. You can, of course, stay logged in and watch that session on gulls. Tomorrow, we have 2 more. We're going to be doing woodpeckers and mud swallows. And then on Thursday, we cover starlings and sparrows. Those are the 6 most common birds that will fall into the realm of bird control. So let's go ahead and get started with pigeons. If you have questions as I go, of course, go ahead and type them into the chat box. What we do is we mute everyone on these until the very end. If we want to open it up for Q&A, we can hear you. But for now, to keep things organized, we have everybody muted. And so feel free to type into the chat box. And I should say Happy New Year to everyone out there. This is our first webcast of 2021, and we're looking forward to providing a whole lot more of these. So all of the sessions that are part of our certification, those are all coming up, and we have 2 dates for every single module out there, which is 20 of our modules we now have. They're going to be available for you to watch twice during the coming months, and we're keeping all this certification for free during the pandemic as it was last year. We're still dealing with a lot of the pandemic and travel issues, so hopefully this is helpful to everyone out there. Let's get into it. Pigeons, all right? The first thing here, we just show you the basic breakdown of what the pigeon looks like. Now, when it comes to pigeons, I haven't met anyone who doesn't recognize a pigeon. The basic coloring and look of a pigeon is very common. There might be some variations. There are mourning doves that are all part of the pigeon family. They're very closely related. All of these birds are non-native to North America. They originally came from Europe, and they are the most common pest bird that you're going to run into. Here's a quick video that covers some in-depth information about the pigeon. Let's watch this. Take a look.
Pigeons. Some people love them.
Everybody thinks that they're dirty and nasty, but they're actually not. They're a dove. Oh, they are doves. Huh. They're a dove.
Other people, not so much.
I hate them. They get way too close. I don't let people into the personal space that pigeons get into. They're just aggressive.
But whatever your stance may be, if you live in a city, you have to deal with them. While pigeons are clearly at home in American cities like New York, they're actually native to seaside cliffs halfway around the world, in North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, where we domesticated them 5,000 years ago. At first, we farmed them for a source of protein, like chicken. Then, we bred them as messengers. In the 8th century BC, for example, the Greeks used pigeons to send results from the Olympic Games to nearby towns. And by the 16th century, pigeons had reached the ultimate peak. hobbyists began breeding the birds for show. Akbar the Great, for example, reportedly had 10,000 show pigeons in his personal collection. Suffice it to say, humans and pigeons were inextricably linked. And that's why Europeans who migrated to North America in the 1600s brought some of these birds with them. And surprise, surprise,
They escaped, and that's kind of what formed these feral populations in cities around the world.
that's biologist Elizabeth Carlin, who studies pigeons at Fordham University. Once pigeons escaped, their population exploded, especially in cities. Because, as Carlin says, cities are essentially tailor-made for these birds. For one, pigeons can thrive on human food, unlike, say, robins or cardinals.
What we have here is pigeons eating, it looks like rice and bagels and probably donuts in there as well. And that ability to consume all this food waste has really made them very successful in cities.
But it's not just our leftovers they're noshing on. We also feed them.
Spike. Quit. That's Spike.
As a result, pigeons spend a lot less time searching for food and a lot more time breeding, which they can actually do without trees. In their native range, pigeons nest on rocky seaside cliffs.
And cities often mimic that by having tall buildings and by having places for pigeons to nest within that, such as fire escapes or AC units or even just ledges that are built in decoratively on the building, all mimic those cliffs.
But there's another reason why pigeons are so successful in cities. They're incredible navigators. Some of these birds can find their way home from nearly 1,000 kilometers away. And those navigation skills serve them well in a complex cityscape.
That is likely linked to their ability to find food within the city and know where food sources previously were and go and check in those food sources.
So how many pigeons live in cities anyway? In New York, there's an adage, 1 pigeon for every person. That would be more than 8 million birds. And whether or not that's true, urbanites have decided on one thing. The city isn't large enough for the both of them.
I got nothing for them. I don't got food. I don't got money. I got nothing. Leave me alone.
In 2003, for example, things got so bad in New York's Bryant Park that a professional falconer was hired to scare them away. And it's not just American cities. In Bangkok, for example, officials have considered imposing jail time for people who feed the birds. But here's the thing. As long as we have thriving cities, pigeons will live in them. In fact, the only thing that might control their populations, aside from cleaning up, is natural predators.
For a long time, pigeons didn't have natural predators within cities.
That's thanks in part to the insecticide DDT, which Americans started using in the 1940s.
The use of DDT made eggshells very thin and decreased the population of raptors such as peregrine falcons and Cooper's hawks and red-tailed hawks.
But in 1972, the Environmental Protection Agency banned DDT. And as a result,
Those predators are now moving back into the city.
and with so much to eat, they probably won't be leaving anytime soon.
So there you go, some interesting facts about the pigeons themselves. Now, I mentioned it before, but the most important thing is that the pigeon is the most common pest bird. When it comes to bird control, there are actual companies that just do pigeon control specifically. And if you're in bird control and that is an area that you want to just specialize in, you can do very well just specializing in just pigeons. And that's one of the unique things about this bird is that they represent as much as 90% of some of the work that gets done out there in bird control. They are non-native, so they're an invasive species, and therefore they're not protected. And what that means, when I say the pigeon is not protected, what that really means is that you can't interfere with a protected bird. You can't interfere with its reproduction and the eggs and that sort of thing. Where pigeons in North America, you can remove the nest, you can remove the eggs, and you can trap out the resident birds. And oftentimes that's very effective when you deal with resident birds to solve the problems. So as far as this bird, you don't have to really worry so much about what you do from a legal standpoint. However, as we recommend, in the world of bird control, you will find that most of your customers don't want you to harm the birds. And so even when you trap birds out, or if you have to get rid of eggs or offspring, you want to be very discreet about it, because most customers have this fondness for birds. Although they do create a lot of problems. They damage the brand image, to companies like, especially national brands where you have bird droppings. There's an association with pigeons, especially in the eastern part of the United States, the term flying rats. And, at first when I heard this term flying rats, I thought that was an overstatement, to kind of use that term. But in reality, these birds are even more filthy than rats and spread even more of a disease vector. They have twice the disease vectors of rodents. So it's not far from correct to call them flying rats. And the general attitude towards these birds is that even though we don't want to harm them, a lot of people want to protect them, there's an association with the birds where they hang out, especially in urban settings, especially where you get involved in retail or restaurant areas. It's a very negative subconscious feeling that people have, and especially in terms of businesses. Most people will make an assumption that if a place is tarnished and there's a lot of wear and tear from the pigeons, that there's less quality to the business wherever that problem is existing. They do cause physical property damage. Their droppings are very corrosive and they're abundant. And the thing that makes pigeons unique is that how their droppings seem to get into the human element in a much deeper and much more obvious way. They just have this thing about them where they really become dependent on humans and the structures, and the damage can be pretty serious for companies. As I mentioned earlier, the disease vectors are real. Now, the health risk, when we talk about pigeons, there's a lot of debate as to how dangerous they really are. But for you as a professional, especially a pest control person that's doing a lot of bird work, your exposure, and somebody like myself that goes, last week I went to 7 different places where I had to help inspect, and there were, from light to medium to extremely heavy infestation. I'm at a much higher level of exposure. So the disease vector really wears down your immune system. And for us as professionals, we're at a much higher exposure, with the exception of some of the customers where you go into a problem, and maybe in a warehouse where the staff that works there every day, they're exposed to bird droppings every day. That wear and tear on the immune system is a real serious risk and can lead to disease problems. Last year, there was a company that I went and inspected with an installer. It was a pest control company. They had this great customer. They had a huge bird problem. They gave a price for the cleanup. They gave a price for the solution. And the company elected to save money and do the cleanup themselves. And I told them, well, be careful. You have to make sure you wear proper safety equipment. And if you want to, I can help you, give you some more information. As a matter of fact, we have other modules. One of them is on specifically bird control cleanup, okay? Bird control cleanup, we go into the details, the safety factors. Well, this company decided they would just do the cleanup, and it wasn't that big of a risk. And out of 4 of the people that were doing cleanup, 3 of them got very sick. 1 of them ended up in the hospital. 1 of them had a problem with their eyes. So there are serious risks. You don't want to underestimate it from a professional who works with birds a lot. Those are the people that get into more trouble. As far as the pigeons, let's get back to their behavior, what really matters for bird control, cleanup and that sort of thing, and solving the problem. These birds have a very strong reclaim instinct. They will reclaim an area if it's not cleaned up properly and the droppings are not cleaned and the pheromone imprint is still there. The birds are going to build a nest in that area if they can, and this is where we see that birds will build a nest right into bird spikes. That is a device that's not used, was meant to be used for nesting, and it demonstrates the imprinting where the birds, once they use their pheromones, they become a resident bird they're going to reclaim. Pigeons are very, very strong. Reclaim instinct is equipped, with their biology. Usually 2 eggs, and about 90% of the time, both eggs will hatch and they will fledge. It's rare that one of the eggs doesn't produce, but that's the idea in nature. A lot of redundancy, a lot of with the extra eggs, that's what that's all about. The offspring grow very fast. One unique thing about pigeons that it affects their biology and affects the pressure in terms of your solution is that both the mother and father, the male and female, will feed the offspring, and that's because pigeons have something in common with flamingos and penguins, and that is that they produce a milk-like substance that's much like what mammals do to feed their offspring, and it's fortified with nutrients and antibodies for making their offspring much healthier. And with both male and female producing this milk-like substance that they feed the offspring, the birds grow to adulthood very quickly, or at least to the adult size. So this is part of the reason we don't see too many juveniles. Most people don't know what the small birds even look like. They rarely see small pigeons. But within about 25 days, the offspring can weigh more than their parents. That's how fast these grow. Now, how that plays into this in terms of bird control is that the offcast, to generate that much nutrition for the offspring, you're going to get a whole lot more dropping content and a lot more waste. Therefore, when you have a nesting area, this is why it's twice as bad as any other bird, and especially when it's right there in human areas. So here's an example of what the juvenile looks like there. It's rare that you see them looking like this, because they'll be like this only for a few days before they start getting their plumage and really starting to look like the adult. The dropping patterns, we're familiar with these, but the reason why I have this picture and then this next one is that you don't want to just clean up these patterns without documenting them. These patterns that we see from the droppings help you to solve, and they teach you the strategy of where specifically you want to solve, especially when it comes to nesting. So make sure that you take really good pictures of their droppings, because it teaches us a lot. Trapping can be very effective. Now here at Bird Barrier, we have the blessing of Humane Society, because nothing that we offer will bring harm to birds. And even though we sell traps, the one thing that I will say is that trapping can be very effective. But if you release the birds, if you just trap and then go somewhere else and release, you're not going to solve anything. These birds will come right back. That reclaim, that instinct to navigate right back to their home spot is very strong. There was an experiment done a few years back where a nest like you see here was used to trap about 30 pigeons, resident pigeons. Those birds were taken here from Los Angeles and brought all the way to Las Vegas, which is 300 miles away, and then they released those pigeons there in Las Vegas. And within, it was I think 3 hours and 40 minutes was how long it took for the first pigeon to return back to the spot where it was trapped. All 30 birds eventually made their way back. That's what they do. These birds are very fixated on a spot. Even though trapping can be effective, all I can say is you cannot release those birds. Something else has to be done. Now, like any other feral cat or anything else, could be brought to the Humane Society, and they take it from there, and that is generally regarded as the proper way to get rid of feral pigeons. Failures in pigeons are very common because of these three main reasons. Temporary devices are used that are going to wear off, like owls, that can be effective at first. Incorrect materials, and then using the actual bird spikes in an improper way, that will lead to failures. When you're dealing with pigeons, don't just treat the symptom areas. This is a very common mistake for newcomers to bird control. They look up at a ledge like this and they say, well, the customer wants to keep them off this ledge up above the signage. Okay, I'll just put spikes everywhere. And certainly that can have a positive impact on the problem with the birds. Of course, that can be good. And that's, in some ways that's good in that you're listening to your customer. They want to solve this area. But you don't want to just treat that symptom area. Ultimately, the customer wants these birds to be gone, and therefore you've got to go deeper and go into eliminating their nesting. Try to find where they're nesting and eliminate the nesting. That is the key to really solving these birds. As with any bird, there's a strategy. If you want to help from us to solve it, we'll ask for this checklist. We want to know what's the pressure level. Are they nesting? That would be high pressure if they're nesting. Get us good photos of the droppings, measurements. Get the Google address of where these pigeons are that you want to solve. And then there are these deterrents that can be used. These are common deterrents that are very effective against pigeons. Spikes for the medium pressure works very well. Bird coil is a variation of that. Bird wire is another very good deterrent because it's low profile, but it will keep birds from roosting. Notice all three of these are medium pressure. These are not for high pressure nesting. Daddy longlegs can work well for pigeons. Flex track for high pressure situations where we use shock system, that will keep them off very well. Bird slide is another deterrent. Solar kits for solar panels. This exclusion PVC coated mesh that's used is very effective at solving solar panel pigeons. Eagle eye is a reflective system that can be used in certain situations. Keep birds off of rooftops. Take care of airspace. We keep the birds out of. Ovo control is a feed that you can give to pigeons specifically that make them sterile and eventually leads to reducing the flock from an area. And of course, netting off with stealth net to prevent them from areas is a great deterrent. Optical gel is probably the easiest way to get started in bird control if you're new, and it's very, very effective. These deterrents are the ones that you can use that are very effective. When it comes to pigeons, they're very controllable. You can have great results to solve these type of birds. We covered the basic bullet points there, and we have a couple minutes left here in case there are any questions. Now, I know that might seem a little bit brief, but that's basically all you really need to know in terms of dealing with pigeons for pigeon control. I'm going to wait a couple minutes here and see if there are any questions, or if anybody out there is getting ready to do a pigeon project of some sort and you want to ask questions. If you've got photos you can share, we'd be interested in that as well. Let's see, we have a question from Melanie. Can you repeat how far away you said the pigeons were taken when they found their way? That was 300 miles. So LA to Vegas is about 300 miles. Now, of course, in a straight line over the mountain passes, it's probably closer to like 260 miles if it were in a straight line. And of course, that's how pigeons fly. They fly in a straight line. And yeah, in 3 hours and 40 minutes. So they will find their way back. It doesn't take very long, especially if you trap out a bunch of birds and you release them, even if you take them 40 or 50 miles away. Now, the one thing I will say about the releasing in some situations, I was talking last year to somebody who does a lot of bird work up in Canada. And so they would trap out birds in the heart of winter, where these birds are holing up for the winter, and it's 12 degrees below zero, and they take them far away and release them. The birds cannot survive that kind of temperature. So where they release them is in an area out in nature where they have to figure out how to survive, and they're not going to try to trek their way back across several hundred miles to find their place in the middle of winter. Now, sometimes in the heart of summer, you know, where it's 130 degrees and out near Vegas, you know, it's unbearable heat, you're going to have better results if you release. But for the most part, you can't just release birds. They're going to go back, and especially these pigeons. So I think that's all we have time for pigeons. Hopefully this has been helpful. In about 5 minutes from right now, we're going to start up on gulls. We're going to do 30 minutes on gulls and cover the basics for those birds. If there are any other questions right now, go ahead and type them in the chat box, and in about 3 or 4 minutes when I come back from break, everybody can take a break right now. We come back, if there are any questions, I'll answer those then as well. Thank you for your time, and we will see you at the next session.